Hey everyone, welcome back to Inclusive Design 24, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Intopia, Fable, TPGI Arc, and Adobe, as well as our Gold supporter, Tetralogical. You can follow us on Twitter at ID24Conf, and if you have any questions for our presenters for this session, tweet them using the ID24 hashtag for the Q&A portion at the end of the session. And now I'm thrilled to be joined by our guest host, Bryn Anderson. Bryn, over to you.
Thank you again, Eric. Welcome back, everyone. I am delighted to introduce to you Leah Brochu. I told you, Leah, I'd get it wrong. It's really not that hard a name. Leah Brochu and Daniela Levy-Pinto, who both work for the National Network for Equitable Library Services in Canada. Leah as an accessibility publishing resource coordinator, and Daniela as an expert in accessibility, including digital technology and livable spaces. They'd also like to remind you that they've been working remotely before it was cool. So bear that in mind as they take us through accessible workflows for inclusive publishing. Over to you both.
Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you everyone for coming to our session. It is a pleasure to be here. We're very excited to share with all of you a little bit about our experience and our knowledge about accessible publishing. Before we do that, we would like to formally introduce ourselves. My name is Daniela Levy-Pinto, and I am the manager of NNELS, National Network for Equitable Library Service in Canada, as Brent said. I am totally blind. I've been using assistive technologies for over 2 decades in academic and professional settings. At NNELS, I lead digital accessibility initiatives to prevent and eliminate barriers. I work to promote a shift to born accessible content and inclusive design, and I am in Toronto. I will now pass it on to Leah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leah. I'm also so excited to be here. Thanks, Daniela. As Bryn said, I'm the Accessible Publishing and Resources Coordinator at NNELS. So over the past couple of years, among many other projects, I've been working closely with publishers and with NNELS' team of accessibility testers with the goal of helping publishers learn how to make better, more accessible books. And that's what we'll be giving you a little intro today. I'll talk a little bit about NNELS. I guess I should also turn slides as they come. Here's our little intro page, which I already covered. So NNELS is a nonprofit organization. It was founded in 2013, and the idea behind NNELS grew out of the need to fill a gap in library services to people with print disabilities. And then around 2018, we started receiving funding from Employment and Social Development Canada, the Social Development Partnerships Program disability component, which is a mouthful. But this allowed NNELS to hire people with print disabilities and begin to do significant work with publishers across Canada. A quick overview to the presentation. We're going to do a little kind of introduction to accessible publishing, talk a bit about our past projects with publishers, talk about we put together some steps to making more accessible ebooks. They're called baby steps. We tried to make them as entry level as possible, and then we'll conclude. Just a note about this presentation. If anybody wants to get the slides, you can find them at accessiblepublishing.ca/ID24-slides. accessiblepublishing.ca/ID24-slides. You can grab them there. All of the images do have image descriptions. All of the images in this presentation are simply decorative. They're just screenshots for the most part. So if there's anything I need to talk about in an image, I will, but I might just kind of ignore them mostly because they're just a lot of screenshots that are covered in the text and what I'm saying. So that's just a little piece of the puzzle. So diving in, here's our little overview to accessible publishing. So what is accessible publishing? It's publishing that considers the needs of all potential users. It prioritizes accessibility and the incorporation of accessibility features, which in turn results in more sophisticated digital content. And it's guided by standards and brought to life by digital reading technologies. Who benefits from accessible publishing? Everyone. While our focus is on publishing accessibly in order to enhance the reading experience for people with print disabilities, which I'll expand on momentarily, everyone benefits from accessible publishing when digital content prioritizes accessibility. And that's because so much of accessible publishing is based on web principles and standards. So an accessible product is, for the most part, a product that utilizes web standards. Who else benefits from accessible publishing? Well, as a part of everyone, it's people with print disabilities, which includes people with visual, mobility, or comprehension impairments. So that can be anything from, blindness, low vision, Parkinson's, limb differences, learning disabilities, or even things like post-concussion syndrome. And it also includes people with temporary or situational impairments. So temporary impairment might be a broken arm, or a situational impairment might be reading in low light. So an accessible, a well-formatted accessible book will serve all of these people. And they can use all kinds of different assistive technologies to improve their reading experience. So what assistive technologies are out there? I'm sure most watchers know this, so I'll just take us through them really quick. There's, of course, screen reading technology. That's software that reads text from the screen of a computer, either out loud or it might push it to a refreshable Braille display, which is a hardware device that connects to a computer that translates text into Braille in real time. And the Braille encoding can be read by touch on the cells. There's screen magnification software, which is self-explanatory. The use is the meaning is in the name, magnifies the screen. And those are the kind of the hot ones. So there's a significant diversity of reading needs among people with print disabilities because there's so many different disabilities and there's so many different solutions, whether it's technology, a hardware, or a software. So blind users might rely on screen readers. Low vision readers will want to control the way text is presented to them. Readers with dyslexia and other learning disabilities, they also want to control the way text is presented. They also might benefit from having word-by-word highlighting, that a well-made book will allow them to do that. And readers with mobility impairment, you need highly structured content to enable efficient navigation. So I'm going to pass it to Daniela, who's going to talk about a couple things.
Thank you, Leah. So why should we prioritize accessibility? If something is technologically sophisticated, thoughtfully made, and accessible, it gives all readers agency over how they can access that text. In most cases, this will mean that they will be able to use the software or hardware that they want or need, and that they will be able to make the customizations that they need. So this is flexibility. Also, there's a business case to be made for accessibility. This is an untapped market. People with disabilities have, and their friends and families, have purchasing power. And this is an untapped market. The number of people with disabilities is growing because also the population is aging in the world. And of course, there's also legislation. That mandates that books are accessible. We have legislation in the US. Now there is legislation in Europe mandating that ebooks should be accessible starting in 2025. There's legislation in Canada. So if in case that making the world a better place for people with print disabilities is not a good enough reason, maybe legislation is a good reason. Actually, purchasing decisions at some institutions, particularly educational institutions, are made depending on or decide favorably on accessible products. Now, accessibility by design. Digital books have the potential to be accessible, but they are not accessible automatically. They have to follow accessibility standards and guidelines. And when ebooks follow these accessibility standards and guidelines, they will also make better experiences for everyone, as Leah was saying. Now, accessible design and inclusive design are important and linked concepts. Accessibility is Design is an important element of accessibility. Accessibility in design terms refers to the qualities that make a product or service open to and usable by everyone. For ebooks to be accessible, they need to be flexible. So again, that people can use them with the technology they need to use or in any way they need to use them. Inclusive design refers to a designed methodology used to create something with no barriers in the first place. An inclusive product then is born accessible when it's designed to be accessible and to work for everyone right from the start, with no need for remediation or adaptation. Accessibility is essential and not an add-on or an afterthought. In short, inclusive design is essential for accessibility, and by thinking inclusively, we create better experiences for everyone. In publishing, when inclusion is a consideration from the start, accessibility can become an organic part of a workflow. It can also mean that when accessibility is incorporated from the start, more efficiency and a superior product for everyone, while at the same time minimizing potential remediation costs in case any barriers still remain. For publishers to create born accessible content, they need to think about this from the start. And very importantly, everyone needs to think about this. All of those contributing to the publishing cycle, from authors to typesetters, designers, proofreaders, everyone has a role to play. This is not a work for one person, because that makes it very costly and inefficient as well. So NNELS, as Leah was saying, has worked for the past 3 years in projects to advance accessible publishing, and this is thanks to funding from the Government of Canada. We have undertaken different initiatives to advance accessible publishing, including working with publishers directly. We have conducted publisher audits on files for we have done over 100 audits and share the results with over 40 independent Canadian publishers. We also provide training for publishers in person and webinars. We created an educational series, short video course for publishers on accessible ebooks. NNELS also convenes an annual Accessible Publishing Summit since 2019 to bring together multiple experts and multiple stakeholders, of course, publishers, but also librarians and others working in this industry, to share expertise and advance in accessible publishing. NNELS recognizes that users have the expertise and put them at the center of this work. People with print disabilities have the expertise in assistive technology. They understand what works and what doesn't, and they can also find solutions for improvement. The NNELS team of accessibility testers includes 8 people with a wide range of print disabilities, from blindness, low vision, to learning disabilities. They are uniquely qualified to assess publisher files and also reading applications and make recommendations. One of the big projects that we did with publishers is the Publishers Workflow Project that partnered our accessibility testers with 17 Canadian publishers, independent Canadian publishers. The goals of the project were to learn about publishers' workflows, assist publishers in creating books that are accessible, and develop best practices for publishers' workflows to incorporate accessibility and to create better and more accessible content. Publishers participating in this project covered all genres, including children's books, poetry, fiction, nonfiction of various levels of complexity, as well as textbooks. While some publishers were only new to the concept of accessible publishing, others had been incorporating accessibility into their content for several years. Hands-on instructions and individualized feedback was a key piece of this project, was very useful for the publishers, especially feedback from the NNELS testers. Being able to ask them questions about their particular content was illuminating for them. Also to ask specific questions about their files and try different things. As part of this project, we created best practices and documents resources for publishers, and we added them to accessiblepublishing.ca. This is a website where the NNELS team, puts all the resources that we create. So please feel free to take a look. Accessiblepublishing.ca. There's a lot of useful information there. Another similar project we did with publishers is the Atlantic Publishers Marketing Association. This project had similar goals to learn about resources, technology, and capability of this particular set of publishers to create accessible books from the start. Assist publishers in creating books that are born accessible and provide information to really empower publishers to create accessible ebooks. Unlike previous iterations of this work in which we got partner publishers through open calls, this project was targeting this particular region. It was aimed to provide content for an accessible collection. So it was very interesting for us because the publishers, their skill sets and their experience range widely. And this allowed the NNELS team to learn more about especially how very small publishers work. And having, for publishers, having the ability to ask questions was instrumental. And also having revisions. We also assessed their files, but we provided them the opportunity to revise the files and we reviewed the result. And that was very helpful for them. We also created workshops and that we delivered via webinars on several topics to provide professional development and training for these publishers. And the topics included how to create image descriptions for different types of content, how to work with conversion houses. A lot of these publishers in this region don't create ebooks themselves, they outsource them. So we provided them with information to how to talk about accessibility. And also we delivered more technical training on the structure of EPUBs, accessibility metadata. So this again was very helpful for the publishers to learn about how to tackle accessibility in all aspects. And now I will pass it on to Leah.
Thanks, Daniela. Excuse me, sorry. Click. So as promised in our abstract, we have found from all this work with publishers that there are lots of ways that digital content can be made more accessible. Our work, of course, focuses on ebooks, but in some cases it can be useful for other types of documents and digital content. Just a note before I dive into the steps, in the resources section of this presentation, accessiblepublishing.ca/ID24-slides, you can get them there. We'll include a breakdown of the resources we've put together But we know that reading through pages and pages of material, which is what the resources are, is mostly text-based, is not always the best way for people to learn. So I hope that this presentation is helpful. So we've got 10 steps to go through. Some are maybe more baby than others, but we'll go through them together. So the first one I want to talk about is image descriptions. This is going to be one of my longer points. It's one of the simplest things to add to an ebook or really any digital content that will make it way more accessible and improve the reading experience for readers with print disabilities. Including image descriptions is becoming more common among publishers, which is great to see, but I wouldn't call it widespread yet. So I've just got a few do's and don'ts for image description. There's definitely way more to know, but this is what we've heard from publishers that they kind of appreciate learning. So our number one, this is specifically for publishers, of course, because it's got about the cover of the book. Do include image descriptions for the book cover. The cover art is an integral part of the book, and all readers should get to know what's on the cover. We're often asking about that, so I put that first. Do think about the image description as a replacement for an image, not a supplement. Some people will sometimes copy what's in a caption for an image and just put that in the alt text, but if it's in the caption, that's already accessible text. So the image description should replace the image. The next thing is do try and involve the author or content creator in writing image descriptions. They're the closest to the content, so if you can get them involved, that's stellar. There's definitely, it's challenging, we've heard, but if it's possible, great. Don't rely on automatically generated descriptions. If you've seen those, in Word or on Facebook, sometimes they are wildly off base. So just don't rely on them, turn them off, get rid of them, write your own. For now, AI probably will get better. Well, it is getting better, but it's not reliable at this point. A big don't leave file names in the alt attribute. That's the code where you put the alt text. Don't leave a file name there. That can be really jarring for someone who's reading a book to hear a string of letters and numbers, .gpg. And my last don't censor. If there's a picture that's uncomfortable, you don't have to go into like extremely explicit graphic detail, but it's important to say what's in a picture. It's important that all readers have the same experience. So don't censor. If you feel you can't write it, then maybe ask someone else. Now, I know that it might seem wild that all of the above could be a baby step, and I agree, maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but including image descriptions, even brief ones, is the accessibility equivalent to giving high fives. It might take a little while before a baby gets the hang of a high five, but once they do, they're unstoppable and everyone loves it. And the technical side of including image descriptions is actually kind of the baby step here. I've got a few places to show. So, you can do it on social media, super easy. When you add an image to Twitter, you can just click edit, and then you're given the option to edit the alt text and add an image description. In Word, you just right click on an image and select edit alt text. In InDesign, you just right click on an image or go to the object menu, go to object export options, then insert some custom alt text. And when you do it in InDesign, that'll be exported along with your EPUB. The final place you can update and insert alt text is in the code itself. For some publishers, like small publishing houses who might outsource their work or have a really print-based workflow, diving into the code can be scary. So I am going to address this in our final step, step 10, but for now, I'm just going to pretend that everyone's comfortable diving into the code because it is quite easy. So if you open up your book in an ebook editor or, Sigil, BBEdit, some code editor, within each set of image tags, which are wrapped around an image, there may already be an alt attribute, or you can add one, and that's where you can just put the alt text. So I've got an example here. The image SRC is where the image is being grabbed from, and then we've inserted some nice alt text drawing of a wide-eyed terrier holds a huge biscuit in its mouth, and it has a big bow around its neck. It is as easy as that. So writing and creating image descriptions is definitely more than a baby step, but we do have some links in the resources to help you out there. My next step is updating the document title elements. Document title elements are often announced by screen readers, and unfortunately, they're frequently left as either the title of the book or maybe even the file name for the particular file that it's in. So you just simply hop into the code, Update the title fields with unique names, whether that's like copyright, preface, or chapter 1, chapter 2, or like this example here, I've got a title that's the name of a chapter. Just hop in there, update those title fields, and it'll make the reading experience better for screen reader users. The next piece is language declarations. This seems a bit intimidating at first, but it comes down to copying and pasting. That's where I started, and I realized, oh, I'm just copying and pasting, and it's proving to be successful. So in your ebook, there's 3 places to include language declarations. The first is in the package element of the OPF file, and I've got a code sample here with, so we've got XML lang equals EN-CA. EN-CA is, of course, English, Canada. You would use whatever language code was appropriate for you. But just add that to this package element, which is already going to be in the OPF. Further down in the OPF file, you have a metadata section for DC. Like there's a bunch of DC, source, DC, author, that kind of thing. So there's a DC language field, and you can add the language there, EN-CA. And then in the HTML header of each document is the final quote unquote place. So that's, if a book has 20 chapters plus a preface, copyright, etc., there might be 30 documents. So you would add the language codes to the HTML header of each document. So you can just copy this, lang equals en, XML lang equals en, throw it into all of your headers, that kind of thing. And I've got some images of it on this next slide here, just for demonstration. And I also have a quick tutorial video, language declarations and EPUB files. So if you download these slides, you can get access to that link. It's also, I think, in the NNELS YouTube. We've got the link for that at the end. The next step I wanted to cover is publishing in EPUB 3. If you're used to publishing in EPUB 2, this might seem like a big step, but I'm calling it a baby step because you know what? Just give it a try. When you export to EPUB from InDesign, you just click the version. You select EPUB 2 or EPUB 3. Just try EPUB 3, export it, see what happens. It's a baby step. You're just checking things out. Easy. The next thing to cover is using heading semantics. Use H1 to H6 for headings instead of simply styling text in other ways. Like we often see paragraphs with a class of chapter heading, and assistive technology will just read that as text. If it's a paragraph, it's just going to read it as text. If it's using H1 to H6, if it's using heading semantics, then it will read it as a navigable element, and it will improve the structure and navigation of the document. So you might wonder, do we have tips on how to implement this baby step? Of course we do. In Word, you want to use word styles. This is not technically HTML, but it's valuable, and it can be maintained into InDesign. And I'll show what that looks like in Word in a moment. And then in InDesign, you want to associate heading styles with HTML. So that's how to use H1 to H6. So this I wanted to show is a Word to PDF situation. So when you use word styles, like the heading levels, heading 1, heading 2, then you will get a result like this document on the right, which has built-in navigation. If you don't use heading levels, if you just style the text, then you won't have any navigation in the document. But if you do use the styles, then it's automatically in there. So it just simplifies things. In InDesign, when you go into modify the paragraph style, there's a field for export tagging, and you can go into that area and tell it what to associate your style. Tell it to associate the style with an EPUB tag or an HTML tag. Sorry, confusing myself. I do have a video on this where I'm a little bit more eloquent, so I recommend checking that out if that's something you're interested in doing. But it is as easy as diving in and just saying, oh, I want my heading level 1 style to be attached to an H1 tag. Boom. The next piece to talk about is using the HR element for context breaks. Assistive technology is able to indicate when a user passes HR elements in the text, and it can often allow a user to move to the next or previous one. The default HR is a horizontal rule, so that's when you'll see a line across the page. That's what HR is short for. but it can be anything that you can have it appear however you like, which includes an image, a blank space, or a character or a set of characters. So I've got some code on the next couple of slides that you're welcome to play with. I'm not going to dive into it because that's definitely more than the baby step is teaching about code, but showing code and so that showing things that you can copy paste, it's really just worth a try. So this is if you wanted to use, something like an asterisk, you would put this code there and put the content as an asterisk in the content attribute. You could put anything you want there, a string of letters, 3 asterisks, whatever you like. For blank space, you simply need to say border of none, so it won't show that line for your context break if you use HR. And you can also use an image. It's a little bit more complex, and so I want to point you to the DAISY knowledge base page on context breaks for this. The DAISY knowledge base is an excellent place to go for all kinds of code needs. It's a little bit technical, but it does have a lot of things to just try out copying and pasting. So it's worth taking a peek. My next piece is using CSS for styling. Let me see. So sometimes we see people use heading levels to style their text. So that's not ideal because that makes it a navigable element when maybe it isn't a navigation point. So it's always good to use CSS for styles. This might seem a little bit more than a baby step, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's a toddler run if that's the next level up from a baby step. But as someone who had never done anything like this before this year, take it from me, this toddler run is worth it, or at least worth a try. And really, it comes down to copying and pasting code, which is why we've included it. Copying, pasting, and crossing your fingers is something just about everyone can do. So I have some examples here that are really common. We have some CSS for drop cap. So drop cap is when the first letter of a sentence is bigger than the rest. Often that initial letter will be wrapped in its own set of span tags with its own code. And when that happens, so for the word one, it would be pronounced as O, ni, of the most important. So to make it be read out as a single word, then you could use semantics, or not semantics, but CSS like this. So this is copy and pastable code you can totally play with. On the next slide, we have uppercase lettering. This is another thing that's really common. Often when people want capital letters, sensibly, they just type it in all caps in the HTML or in the InDesign book, which gets exported to HTML with the text the same way. But the recommended approach is to use this CSS styling. Otherwise, there's a good chance that all of this will be read out letter by letter. So say ICANNOT. But if you use the font variant small caps, then it will be read out normally, which is what you want. So there's a couple examples. There's lots more, but those are two that we see often, and two ways to just honestly easily copy and paste and make a book more accessible. My next step is using the ACE Accessibility Checker. This is a free desktop program that's available for Mac, Windows, and Linux, and it was developed by the DAISY Consortium. It's an automated program that will identify around 30% of common accessibility errors, which is a great start. It's available in English and in French, which is excellent. And the report might be a little bit confusing, but it's a good place to start and see how far along the book is with respect to accessibility. It gives a good kind of bird's eye view. And my next piece, which is definitely more of a toddler run step, as I've termed it, which is a terrible term, is including accessibility metadata. So these accessibility metadata will enable potential readers to know if the book will meet their needs, and they'll know also about the amazing accessibility features that you've been working hard to include. Metadata can be used to outline the accessibility of a file, and it is a requirement for passing the ACE by DAISY accessibility checker. So if you are getting metadata errors in the ACE checker, then I'm confusing myself. Anyways, there are 4 required tags and 1 recommended. So there's access mode sufficient, which is the recommended one, accessibility feature, accessibility hazard, and accessibility summary. Now, actually figuring out which ones you need, like which attributes you need for each of the required tags, that is kind of a tricky part. There's lots of good information on the DAISY knowledge base, and very helpfully, when you use the ACE accessibility checker, it has a dialogue to help you build that in kind of automatically. So on the next slide, I just have kind of a metadata example. I'll just leave that here for, if people want to download the slides to look at this. It's just kind of an example of what you might see in the book. And on the following slide, it's just a screenshot showing the exact same thing as the text on the previous slide. And now I'll show you the ACE accessibility metadata side of things. So this is kind of on the metadata tab, and you're able to just go in. If you're missing accessibility metadata, you can just go in, hit edit. You can use their menus to pick the items that you want to include. And then when you're done that, you would close that and just hit save, and then it'll save that EPUB with accessibility metadata added. So ACE is really making it as easy as possible to get this stuff in there. It's really useful, and it's a good time. And my last step is playing with the code. So I just want to remind you that these steps were in no particular order. So this one about playing with the code, I've given out lots of bits and pieces of code to play with today. I recommend using, BBEdit or Sigil. Those are free, which is why I like them so much. Sigil is a really great ebook editor. It gives you a panel or 3-pane window if you want. You can see the file list, the code, and how the book appears. So you can see everything at once. When you dive into the code, hot tip from me is always be sure to have a backup of that file, and just in case something gets messed up, and Control-Z just isn't quite enough. But really, if you haven't ever poked around in the code of an ebook, just check it out. I know I've made a lot of promises in this talk, but this is the last one. I promise that adding meaningful text to your document title elements, or adding language declarations, or anything else I've gone over in this presentation, it will be as easy as typing or even copying and pasting. So give it a try. Go wild, as this point says. So those are the steps. I'm going to pass it back to Daniela now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leah. So after having gone through all these steps, I want to bring us back to what working with publishers has taught us, and summarize this a little bit. We can say that working with publishers in accessibility has been a very interesting and rewarding experience. We've seen that all across the board, whether companies are large or small, whether publishers are just beginning to get into accessible publishing or think about accessibility, or whether they have been doing this for years, Canadian publishers are excited about accessibility, eager to learn, and also they really want to create content that works better for everyone, and including, of course, readers with print disabilities. It has been really interesting and also great to witness publishers realize that actually if they enhance the accessibility of their ebooks, they are not only improving the experience for those with print disabilities, but for everyone. It's great for everyone to have a table of contents, not only for readers who are blind or who have other types of print disabilities. And also by tackling some of these things and accessibility features more systematically, sometimes their work becomes a bit easier as well. So by taking steps for accessible publishing and modifying their workflows, publishers are now contributing to create a more inclusive landscape. To summarize the steps for an accessible workflow, we'll just do 3. The first thing is really awareness. Start talking about accessibility with everyone in the team, with everyone involved. It is very important. It would set the stage for better products, and it will go a long way to eliminate barriers. And again, to make this a collective effort. It's not a one-person thing. If it's a one-person issue, then it's more difficult. Everyone is part of the solution. The second step would be really start small. And as Leah was saying, these are maybe little steps, baby steps, but if someone is new to accessibility, if it can be very overwhelming to try to incorporate every single accessibility feature into the next publication. It's better, and it will go a long way to start by doing simple things and then adding things incrementally in the next publication. And with time, things add up, and the accessibility will be significantly improved, but really step by step. And last but not least, ask for assistance. Reach out to experts in accessibility. Accessibility experts, and importantly, users with lived experience can help publishers by testing files, providing accessibility evaluations, recommending solutions for improvement, and very importantly, awareness. If publishers know what the implications are, they will want to do this. And awareness is really the first step. Now I will pass it on to Leah for her final thoughts.
Thanks, Daniela. So yeah, it was a pretty short time ago that I didn't know any of this. You know, I did my master's in library studies. I didn't do any computer code. I knew a little bit of HTML. I'd heard of CSS, and that was about it. But it's just been, you know, maybe a year or two where I've been diving into it, and I feel like pretty confident. So that's why we put together these baby steps. Just playing with the code is the best way to get more confident, and it won't be long before you're making more accessible digital content, thereby making the world a better, more equitable place, which is the goal. So thanks, everyone. And just to go over the last pieces in our things, we've got our little get in touch slide here. I'll leave this up in case there's any, while we take any questions, if they're around. We've got Twitter, we've got YouTube, we've got email. You can also, we've got an FAQ thing here on accessiblepublishing.ca. You can submit an accessible publishing question. And then we've got lots of resources in the, well, that was all messed up the way it appeared, but we've got resources section, so all kinds of videos and helpful things there. Thank you.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you both very much. And clearly a lot of resources at the end. Would be great to get some of those. I know a few people were sharing them on Twitter whilst you were talking. So that's cool. Really interesting. In particular, I mean, it's very nice to connect the dots between the benefit to a non-sighted AT user and someone not using AT, with the example of the sort of the structure, the semantic structure, the heading structure, and how that provides a kind of contents. I personally don't use assistive technology. I don't use a screen reader, but I visually impaired user. I have a massive monitor and I zoom into things, and I actually use Audible, generally speaking, for books after not a great experience with Kindle Fire and some of its earlier iterations. So and that's really, I was quite curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what other considerations are there for low vision users, or you know, obviously there are some obvious things like color contrast and things like that, but are there some other considerations that has come out of your work for non-assistive technology users?
I think the main one, and this is kind of basic, and yeah, maybe this is a step I should have thrown in, is publishing reflowable books as opposed to fixed layout. Sometimes fixed layout is obviously required if it's a really image heavy publication, but we do see it sometimes for just novels. And we're just like, why are you doing this? Because, you know, for people who don't know, the fixed layout, it doesn't give you the customization that you need. You can kind of just blow things up, but it's not in an easily readable way. So publishing reflowable, that'd be the baby step for for low vision users, that kind of thing. There's probably more, but that's the one on the top of my head.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I've put you on the spot. So I mean, I was actually thinking about our own content or UX content guidelines, UX copy guidelines. That's a bit of a mouthful. That we have where I work, and although they're for web really and not for EPUB, there's sort of things like avoid caps, you know, and serif fonts and things like that. And I mean, providing that the tool that you're using or the device that you're using will allow you to manipulate those things, and providing that a developer had included that kind of flexibility in what they're producing, then that would be great. But I kind of feel that maybe there's some quick wins there for EPUB that are not really so well known about yet, or not so well supported. But maybe that's an incorrect assumption. Don't know what you guys think.
No, it is, you're correct. EPUB is a very flexible format if it is reflowable. So definitely superior than PDF for this reason. But also sometimes, I mean, and this is really getting into a big area, but like the technology or the reading system needs also to play and to support the features of files. So really, EPUB is superior. EPUB is HTML based. And because there are standards and guidelines, it is, if done well, it can really be customizable. And when something is reflowable, it's customizable. EPUBs provide the flexibility to accommodate readers with the broadest range of print disabilities.
Including things like changing the color of text, or even the font family.
That may depend on the reading system, if you know, in terms of the color contrast and those customizations. But if the EPUB is reflowable, it should allow those customizations if the app allows it. Yeah.
Very interesting. It'd be nice to get some people who own those publishing systems. I'm not quite sure how to refer to them. To I kind of feel like maybe that the devices are not really leveraging the full power of the technology to support all of the different sort of accessibility considerations. But anyway, a wonderful talk, fantastic talk. I'm just going to check to see if we've got any other questions. Not sure we have. So I'm going to pass back to Eric.
All right, thank you. And Leah and Daniela, thank you again for such a great talk. I learned a ton about a world I don't really know a lot about.
Absolutely.
So, just thank you. So as we wrap up, if you enjoyed this session, make sure that you hit that YouTube like button, and don't forget that you can also subscribe to youtube.com/inclusivedesign24 to be kept in the loop for future events. Also a reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and that you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website. Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to our sponsors, including Intopia, Fable, TPGI ARC, Adobe, Tetralogical, Intuit, InfoAxia, Center for Inclusive Design, Web Directions AAA, Adrian Roselli LLC, and KenAccess. And with that said, Inclusive Design 24 will be back on the top of the hour with our next session. Looking forward to seeing y'all then.